councillor. I'm an officer of Bridport Town Council. I'm the community projects manager, and my role in the council is to work on things like the neighbourhood plan, the town investment plan, the climate emergency plan, and working on the various aspects that make up these plans to try and bring about activity in our community. So what I wanted to do was just quickly make a few points by means of introduction, and then I'll hand over to Ellie, who, as Sandra said, is the author of this report, which we commissioned using money that we secured from the Dorset National Landscapes Sustainable Development Fund. So without their grant support, this report wouldn't have happened. And so we are very pleased to acknowledge their support for this piece of work. I think my first point really is to just put the report on food security into the context of our work in Bridport on climate emergency and the ecological crisis as well. So we declared an emergency in 2019 and produced an action plan that same year. And we allocated £100,000 worth of town council funding to try to kickstart that action plan's delivery. Last year, 2023, we reviewed our climate emergency action plan and what we'd achieved and what we hadn't achieved. And we've recently produced a revised action plan. And I think that the emphasis has slightly changed in this review. So where in the first plan, we were very much focused on trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our own activities and helping other people do the same around Bridport. Our emphasis now is very much supporting our community in adapting to the inevitable consequences that will come from the climate change and impacting on all sorts of aspects of life. And food, I think, is a particularly important one. I won't go into the sort of wider issue of food supply, market shocks, the cost of living crisis that's impacting on our community. But the fact that in the last year, we've lost 2 greengrocers in Bridport, and getting hold of locally grown, nutritious, healthy, sustainable food is becoming a challenge, not only in actually trying to source it, but also in the cost of it. And that's something as a council we're really focused on trying to address. So the work that we've commissioned, we've supported the food sector in Bridport. So Bridport Food Matters, the local food festival, have all been supported over a number of years. But we wanted to try to do some more work around food security. And we see this very much in the context of increasing challenges on land use. So land use for energy, so solar farms and biofuel crops, for land use for natural material production, for hemp and construction materials, through to composites, materials for composites, through to the need to create space for nature. So that increasing demands on the use of land. And we think as a council that it's really important that the needs of the community are factored into how we manage and how this land use around Bridport changes. So we see the food security plan as a very much a kind of visionary piece of work to think ahead to, you know, the sort of land use system that we need in the future to serve Bridport and help us transition into a low carbon net zero future. And that might well be accompanied by many other land use plans. I think the final point really is that, you know, the food system that we've got that's developed over the last 70 years is not going to change overnight. And we were really keen after a round of consultations that we took place in September. So we put a draft plan out in September, opened that up for the public and farming organisations to respond to. And we were very keen that we needed to keep the plan focused on actions. And so Ellie's included in the document immediate actions, near-term actions and longer-term actions. And I think for us, that's a real start now. That's this piece of work is the beginning. Councillors listened to the report presentation a week or so ago. and approved the document and said this should guide us now in taking actions to support a fairer, more nutritious and sustainable food system to serve our community. But the hard work starts now, is translating those actions that Ellie's identified into solid pieces of work that aren't going to be done by the town council, need to be done in collaboration with a wide range of actors and players, including the voluntary sector, but also farmers, landowners, growers, etc. And that's the piece of work that we need to move into next, is working with people like Candida and Bridport Food Matters and others to start to really put the detail on how we make the changes that Ellie's articulated in the plan. So I think at that point, I'll hand over to Ellie. If there's any questions from the audience tonight about the process and why the town council's involved and how we got it through committees, more than happy to answer those when we get to the questions. Or if you want to put a question in the chat, I'll respond in the chat about those sorts of town council things. But I'll hand over to Ellie, who can walk you through the document that she produced for us. Okay, thanks.
Hi everyone, it's really great to see everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to present this to you guys because I think it's something that really needs to happen everywhere around the UK, to be honest, and Bridport is a really great place to get started because there's such a strong history of engagement with the food system, and Candida will talk to you about some of the stuff that's already been going on for ages later. So there's a lot of potential there, and I think obviously it's going to take a long time to make the change that we need, but it's great to see that there's so much effort going into starting and really giving it a push. Let me figure out if I can. I've got a short presentation, but given that the one I gave before about all of the complexities was a bit, well, very, very long, I've skipped over most of the calculations. So like David said, if sorry, I'm just going to switch this. If you do have questions about the process or any of the calculations, please just ask, stick them in the chat or email me. And there we go. Am I screen sharing yet? No.
Not yet.
Sorry.
You were, and then you weren't.
Okay.
Yep, that's good.
Okay. Have you got the big screen version or the
I've got a divided screen. I've got a divided screen, big on one side and a bit smaller on the other. So
you would think I'd be better at this after having Zoom classes for so long. But you know what? That'll be fine. We'll just hang on. There we go. There we go. Okay. So I started with looking at the area around Bridport. David and I made the decision to cover the area covered by the Bridport Local Area Partnership, but it has the potential to be extended out to a larger region. I think that West Dorset would be a very good sort of size to aim for, maybe in if you could get the participation of a larger group of parish councils. But here's a really nice compact area with parish councils that have already agreed to act together on issues of importance like this. So hopefully it'll be something that'll be quite easy to spread across the Bridport local area. There's not a lack of land, actually. Nationally, we do have a lot of demand for land, a lot of pressures for land, but here, obviously, we're quite rural. There aren't that many inhabitants, as around 21,800, I believe. It is growing, obviously, with the new developments around Bridport, and we're seeing more local tourists as well since COVID. So the population has the potential to expand, but we really do have a lot of land available around here. Most of it's within an area of outstanding natural beauty, so it does have some restrictions, but all of the sorts of farming that we would consider normally fall within those bounds anyway. So to feed this population, again, the calculations are pretty complex, but you can ask about them. We would need around 26.9 thousand tons of product. This is, everything people consume, from cheeses to breads, meats, oils, things like that. The diet at present has a lot of issues. We're facing sort of malnutrition, in that there's a lack of essential nutrients, not a lack of calories. And a lot of people are not getting nearly enough fruit and veg. We're on around 3.7 portions per day compared to the recommended, 7, but even 5 would be good. So if we switch the population to a better diet, that would be more fruit and veg, and then around a third less meat, a third less oil and less sugar, and then a bit more cereals and legumes to make up for calories. That would bring the average diet in line with NHS recommendations, and that would reduce the amount of food that we needed slightly. If we factor in a potential population increase, then the demand goes up to 27.9 thousand tons. This is per year, sorry. And on average, this could be translated to around 56.5 thousand tons of raw production. So that's grains, oil, seeds, raw sugar beet, meat, and so on. And we estimate that around 95% of this could be produced within the local area. Realistically, that's maintaining supply for sort of luxury goods like olive oils and chocolates and coffee, things that can't reasonably be grown locally. But we already in the area produce far more than we need of cereals, pork and dairy, and eggs and poultry stuff. So that would be focusing more on shifting production to feed into local supply rather than exporting it. The amount of production would need to go up for legumes, potatoes, sugar beet, beef, oils, and fish, and it need to go up a lot with regards to horticulture. So the horticultural section is really weak locally. But 95% of demand could be met without a large expansion of agricultural land here. In calculating the number of farms, this is making estimates about what sort of farm that the Bridport area might benefit most from. So that's a range of different horticultural production methods, small ones that focus more on community engagement and focus on pumping out the fruit and veg. And then a sort of mixed farm, arable, different sorts of potatoes, sugar beets, cereals and oils and so on, in rotation with livestock. This is, similar to the sorts of farm that we have in the area currently, but just merging them together to help get the nutrient balance more back to normal, instead of requiring a load of agrochemicals. There still need to be some specialty chicken and pig farms like the ones that we have at current. Agroforestry, this is a very broad term, so the sort of agroforestry I've put in this table is just the very small scale sort of sheep under orchards for fruit, but as I will mention later on, agroforestry should be something that's adopted across all of the farms, so really to increase climate resilience, and for a number of other reasons, all of these should have trees in them somewhere. Vineyards, there's really strong potential for expansion of regional wines as the climate warms, although they're something that's less essential to food security per se. But we've included them because they could be a nice way to get people involved in the idea and to add some value to producing and processing. Fisheries, again, a really good potential for expansion, especially in this area with such a strong coastline. And then biodiversity centres. In the calculations, we've only factored in one sort of biodiversity centre in the area, and this would really, rather than being a farm, be sort of like an educational facility, a place that carried out ongoing research into adapting seeds to the local conditions and training farmers and letting them know how they can adapt their management practices, training consumers, training processes, etc. So that's sort of a farm, I would say, sort of a school. So in the calculations, we've made the presumption that these sort of farms would be the best for the Bridport area, and factoring in the land needed for productive land, land needed for grazing, for animal feeds, and then additional land for infrastructure and so on. We've come up of an estimate of around 14.8 thousand hectares. If you remember earlier, I said that there were around 17.9 thousand hectares of land available, agricultural land available, once you exclude the areas that are under special designations and so on, and urban areas. So that's coming in under the available land capacity. It is, I think, slightly more than is in agricultural production at the moment, but it's quite hard to tell because there aren't very many statistics for such a small scale. So it's that there will be a large shift in the total amount of land cultivated. Then also we've estimated around 1,000 people would be engaged in land work directly. This isn't including people who are involved in, processing and stuff like that. When there was a survey carried out on the number of people engaged in the food and farming sector in 2016, I believe, there were an estimated 2,000 employees involved in the business. But the majority of these are involved in retail and processing, so probably only around 400 actually engaged directly in agriculture. So as you can see, that's quite a large increase in the number of farmers on the land. The main reason for this is that we've suggested having a lot more of a lot smaller farms instead of the large scale ones that typically predominate. So this might be something that is slightly longer term, this amount of recruitment, because obviously there's a lot of scope for like increasing the number of farms to do with horticulture and so on. But where we have a number of large farms devoted to arable production or grazing production or so on, it might be less feasible to consider breaking up those farms into a number of smaller farms. So this labour estimate might be a bit higher than what we would realistically see in the coming years. But those are sort of rough estimates for in the long term how many people we could consider training and recruiting. So the majority of my presentation is about the actions, and if you want more detail on all of the first part, please do read the report. I've sort of broadly categorized the actions into ones we can do that are consumer facing, and then ones that we can carry out that are producer facing. So obviously there's going to need to be a huge shift in demand if we're going to get people to start eating a healthier and more local seasonal diet. A lot of that is going to come from just continued support for the existing campaigns that Bridport carries out. So Bridport Food Matters works a lot on consumer-facing campaigns, and carrying this on with educating people about seasonal diets and educating people about healthier diets is really beneficial. This could potentially be expanded a bit more in schools, try and get people young and really get them growing up with this awareness of well, it could be termed a cultural diet, eating stuff that is produced locally and is in season. There's also fantastic events that go on, like the Bridport Food Festival. So things like that, as well as partnering with local retailers for things like seasonal menus, maybe even celebrity chefs to get people to come on and talk about the benefits of local seasonal food, get people learning how to cook different seasonal vegetables. That would be great. And then we also considered the possibility of partnering with other regions. It could be other regions in the southwest, but it could be partnering with areas abroad. Maybe even if we're considering maintaining imports of some sort of produce, such as olive oil, you could consider twinning with regions abroad that will produce those in a sustainable manner. So for example, Riverford, who do organic veg deliveries, continue to offer produce such as oranges and tomatoes out of season, but these come from specific Riverford farms abroad, where they've guaranteed that they're still using organic practices, and they really engage consumers in that by having a little bit where you can read about the farms and read about the producers, and that helps to create a lot of support. Educational programs obviously will need to continue, and this is a thing that could be really great to have in a biodiversity centre or in a sort of food hub, as Bridport Food Matters is working on. A local food hub could carry on, working, adapting recipes and connecting people with local food. And then policy advocacy, that would be sort of things considering like the sugar tax, potentially taxing unsustainably produced meat and so on. But obviously for our purposes, we're a little bit more concerned with the actions that we can carry out without policy changes, because they'll be slow to get around to on a national level. Increasing production. So like I said, this is going to be quite a large issue for horticulture. Whereas for most other sectors, production is sufficient, so it's not mostly about redirecting production. But for horticulture in particular, and slightly for oils and legumes, and for fisheries, we need to get more people into the sector. And the main barriers to that are access to land and access to training. So One thing that would be really beneficial to work on as soon as possible is connecting farmers to land. A number of you have talked to me already about available land in the Bridport area that people want to make available for farming agroecologically. And so getting that out there so that it attracts experienced growers would be really beneficial. It's quite hard for farmers to get started. Access to accommodation is a really big barrier. So supporting, changing of planning policy and making available more accommodation that's close to land would be really important. And then increasing the accessibility and availability of training programs, particularly with regards to horticulture, but for all sectors, training farmers on how to grow food in a sustainable agroecological way. So this could be educational programs developed with colleges or courses developed by the Land Workers Alliance or courses developed locally and offered through a local food hub. But anything that can increase the number of skilled growers that we have, because right now there's quite a lack of people willing to take the lead on this. And then in the long term, we're again looking for policy at national level change, but continuing this education and outreach, particularly with regards to how we grow stuff when the environment is changing. And with continued cultivation, we'll be seeing the landscape begin changing as well. Most of this will be good. Continued agroecological farming can have a really beneficial effect on soils, and incorporating trees can be really good, but farmers will need to learn how to work with that. On the consumer side, again, we need to make sure that the food that is produced is accessible. And there are a load of actions that can be taken on that front. So a lot of it could be helped through increasing direct supply, that is direct from farmers to consumers without going via retailers. And things that could help with that are for example, creating more CSAs, community supported agriculture, or delivery schemes. As David said, we've seen the shutdown of greengrocers, but increasing the number of farmers markets and farmers stalls that are, in locations that people can get to easily, or the amount of delivery services, that would be really beneficial. And then there are mechanisms that farmers can introduce to reduce pricing. So things like sliding pay scales based on income, or people choosing to subsidize boxes for others, redirecting what would be food waste or food surplus to food banks or food hubs. That's also a way of increasing the availability of food for those on low incomes. And then if we're looking at the longer term, something that we could consider is creating wholesale networks or wholesale producer networks where producers can collaborate and pool their produce together, hopefully look at processing together using shared facilities and shared equipment, which will bring costs down. And then we could also consider trying to create networks and collaborations with supermarkets and high street retailers. This is a thing that will be a little bit more difficult, but honestly, if we want to make food accessible and easy, it's going to have to happen in the long term. And a lot of companies like Tesco and other high street supermarkets are trying to meet their climate goals. So it is something that could be sold to them. For supporting local food chains, for getting more of the food that is produced into the local economy, we need to consider making it easier to access local markets. for farmers. So maybe things like online platforms. We need to consider developing more local infrastructure for producing and processing things locally. Again, we could consider sort of pooling farmers' produce or yields and processing them using shared equipment. And one thing that the council can do is really support public procurement and consumption of local food in educational institutions and hospitals and so on. And then again, in the long term, we really need to invest in the infrastructure to make sure this will be viable in the long term. So things like allowing farmers to store produce, making sure it can be sent wherever it needs to go within the local area. Sorry, I'm aware I'm running over. And then something that's been more comprehensively covered by the Seeding the Future report, Growing Through Climate Change, is increasing resilience in the face of climate change. These are all actions that are sort of covered within the definition of agroecological farming. This will rely on educating farmers and encouraging them to transition to agroecological methods. And this is just all about reducing the amount of inputs and increasing resilience through building the diversity of crops and livestock, and increasing the amount of carbon that we're sequestering, increasing the amount of trees across all of the landscape and so on. So a lot of that can happen through training for farmers. And again, I really strongly advocate for a biodiversity centre that could focus on developing cultivars that are really resilient and high yielding in the local conditions, and can carry on developing new ideas as climate change progresses. So it'll be a process of continual adaptation. The few ideas that were picked out as key priorities were really to do with changing diets, so increasing the amount of fruit and veg that people eat, increasing affordability and convenience. So that especially we're looking at maybe supporting Bridport Food Matters idea of a local food hub, and looking at these wholesale networks, and then supporting this transition to sustainable farming for farmers that are already here. So that's looking at establishing training programs and getting more of those people who are interested to connect with the land that is available. Right, sorry that went on for longer than expected, but Candida can talk a bit more about some of the actions that are already going on. As David said, thanks to Dorset National Landscape Fund for funding this, and thanks to Bridport Town Council for commissioning it. I hope you all think that it is viable and possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellie. That's wonderful.
Okay.
Hi, so shall I just jump in?
Please do.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I mean, we think it's an absolutely fantastic piece of work and incredibly inspiring, and such a welcome. I mean, it's very comprehensive, and we really welcome the whole food systems approach. So we're looking at the whole thing in the round, the supply and the distribution of food, but also the kind of food that we consume and the demand for it and how to increase that. So it also provides a fantastic platform for action. I mean, you've highlighted actions, and I think it's really important that they're staged, because it can seem all quite overwhelming because there's an awful lot to be done. However, I think there's quite a bit, as you refer, which is already in motion. So I think we've got the building blocks, and you provide the plan provides the framework for that, which is fabulous. So I'm going to try and share my screen as well, see if this works. here, here, I think. And I've just got a few slides. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
That's good.
So I'm talking really, I was asked to talk more about the process of our involvement, Bridport Food Matters involvement in the development of the plan, and also going forward, because that's where we probably have a bit more of an input. But in brief, Bridport Food Matters is a community group, and we've been working on food security for some time, and a sustainable food system for probably about 4 years. We started as a partnership between Seeding Our Future, which is referenced in this report, and which commissioned Growing Through Climate Change. It was a partnership between Bridport, and Bridport Food Matters was formed as a partnership between Seeding Our Future, the Bridport Local Food Group, and Transition Town Bridport, or now Sustainable Bridport. And we focused at that time particularly on adapting to climate change. And since then, we are also really focusing more recently on equity and on health and on community resilience, and how those run through the issue of food security and a sustainable local food system. And effectively, we are, Bridport Food Matters is a communications platform and a sort of engagement channel, if you like. We have a website, we have a newsletter, we try and help to join the dots. And our ambition for a community food hub is a sort of a physical way of bringing all those different elements together and continuing that joining up the dots possibility. So that's basically what we are at the moment, what we try and do. And we've got a few projects, as well as the networking and linking up role that we have. We've got a few projects on the ground in relation to community resilience, such as more growing our own, and a project called We Dig No Dig, which is encouraging people to grow more food wherever they can. And another project about access to land, particularly for new entrant farmers on long-term leases. So hopefully that gives a flavour of what we do. Now, the Bridport context, we put together this map because we're very aware that there is so much going on in Bridport, as everybody knows, and has been going on for so long. There've been many initiatives over the last 20 years. The Bridport Food Festival celebrates 20 years this year. Food Links was formed even earlier than that, I believe, with an ambition as a community hub as well. So we just needed to sketch it out for our own good, really. And Sarah Wilberforce did this illustration where you've got the organisations, main organisations in yellow, and then projects in red, and various other initiatives. And this is a working document. This is a kind of evolving document. It needs updating. That was only done in May. We've updated it in September, and we will do again. So there's more and more that is added as people engage in the process. We take this to events. But you can see in blue the main kind of themes, if you like, the main components of the local food system and food, and what would add up to be food security. We are all these community initiatives basically are very overstretched, voluntary groups, and they're under-resourced, but things are gathering momentum, things are joining up, initiatives are joining up increasingly. Some of these lines show some of the connections and the partnerships that are developing, and there are many more since then. As I say, this isn't really up to date. And you do have, they look rather peripheral, but they're not, of course. However, this is sort of consumer focused, but around the edges are those, the names of some of the suppliers, the farmers which supply currently directly to the town. The initial process of us being involved with the Bridport Food Security Plan was actually David Dixon and I put together a bid for Sustain, which would have enabled us to. We failed to get that bid, but it would have enabled us to, as well as to have Ellie's input in authoring the plan, it would have had a series of community engagement events in food security specifically to feed into the plan. And we didn't get all that funding, and subsequently David raised the funds, as he mentioned. So together with another community organisation, a charity called Home in Bridport, we raised some funds for a series of events, more focused, if you like, on the equity and the access to affordable food, or the lack of access to nutritious food amongst certain sectors of our community, because we felt that that was an important contribution that we could make, if you like, to complement what we knew that Ellie would do, of course, absolutely brilliantly, with a whole food systems approach and her particular knowledge and expertise in the supply and the distribution of food. But we felt that our role is also where we can help to complement that expertise, is to bring things to the kind of reality of Bridport's context, as shown in that previous map, and then specifically to bring in the equity dimension of it, if you like. So we ran a couple of events in the allotment, a community allotment, which is run by Home in Bridport, which is in Skilling, which is a more under-resourced or less well-off area, as a way of bringing people together and around food, and to talking to people about what they want and what their needs are, and the benefits that they perceive of food and of having nutritious food as well. So we ran a couple of events to do that, and then ultimately put on an event called, the whole project was called Food Security for All, It Matters. So this event in November that you see the front page of the report about was an invited group of, there were about 40 people there in the end, and that represented about 30 organisations, community organisations that work with, if you like, emergency food provision and the redistribution of surplus food, and other support organisations, and the schools which run the Edible Gardens projects, the community allotments, the various community groups that are engaged in the real grassroots increasing community resilience. And that was a pretty good event, and also came up with a load of recommended actions. And Ellie refers to those in her report. So that was one of our roles, is really trying to fill a gap and to complement what we knew Ellie would do really well. So the other thing, so bringing the plan, helping to bring the plan to Bridport's current reality, and Ellie has kindly cited Bridport Food Matters on a number of occasions in her presentation, which is great, and does indeed do so within this report, within her report. So what we did was to participate. No, hang on a minute. I'll tell you a little bit. I won't talk in detail about what we're doing, because I think people can ask about that, and Ellie's referred to it. But you will see in the plan a reference to this hub. And the hub, it's not defined what the form of the hub will be. It could take a number of forms. Initially, we'd been thinking of it as perhaps involving a kind of, it's a community hub, which would be a cafe, but would also have a prep kitchen that people could use for, if they were doing catering for large scale events. And it would have a space that would mean that we could have workshops and training and skills and skill sharing and skills development. So it's sort of, it's a community hub, but potentially it could also embrace what Ellie's talking about, is a biodiversity centre in some way, although it may not be affordable to have something like that in the centre of town, which the community hub would probably need. So that's briefly the idea about the community hub. Anyway, so those things, I don't think I'll mention those things much more, but in terms of how we participated in the process, as well as helping to bring it to Bridport's current reality, we also did what we do generally, which is to invite people to send out the first draft to our quite large mailing list through our newsletter, and really encourage people to comment on that first draft. And I don't know whether it was too much, Ellie, or what, and how many people came through that. But we wanted to make sure that people had a say in its final form in the development, if necessary. We participated in an initial scoping meeting with Ellie and with Jyoti and David, and we also commented ourselves extensively on that first draft. And in the town council, we spoke to the town council's environment committee meeting, which was last week, where they were considering the final draft of the report. And our one recommendation there was for the inclusion of 3 relevant recent reports that were sort of focused more on Bridport and Bridport area. So I finally got to this slide now that you can see. That was How Can Bridport Feed Itself was done actually in 2017, and that focuses on our economy. And it was quite an extensive piece of work that was done by the Reconomy Centre in Totnes. Although old, although quite outdated, I think it gives can provide a really useful picture of the more of the kind of retail sector, if you like, and the value of that at that time to our economy. And then Growing Through Climate Change, Ellie has mentioned, that was commissioned by Seeding Our Future for Bridport Food Matters, and it's based on the southwest of England, and it looks at climate adaptation, the kind of crops that we may be more likely to be able to grow, the kind of crops that we're less likely to be able to grow. And then the third reference that has been included is the previous document, which is our Food Security for All, It Matters. So I'm trying to give a flavour of our kind of input and our involvement in the process up to now. And it's been a very positive process by and large. I think it's a really effective and a suitable kind of collaboration, if you think about it, if other people are wanting to kind of reflect on what they might do in their own towns or in their own wherever they live, is that you have the expert content provided by Ellie, the person who really knows that farming landscape as well as the national landscape, and knows food security and the food system probably like the back of her hand, and is also based in this area, so knows the local reality to some extent, of course. And then the link up perhaps with the link up between that and then a community group which have, such as Bridport Food Matters, which has a kind of ear to the ground and can bring a bit more of a grassroots perspective, if you like, to complement. And then thirdly, the local authority, last but not least, which provides that policy framework and the enabling environment and the other leverage that the local authority can bring. So I think as a model, that's probably a really good one to think of going forward. I think the question now is what next and what can we do? This image is just really just because I like the image. It's not really about what we can do, but I think that the thing is, how can we rise to the challenges and the opportunities that are presented in the plan? The plan is a fantastic framework and a fantastic foundation for action. We will help deliver that action plan. We'll help develop it and we'll help deliver it, because that's very much our kind of raison d'etre as well. And it does tie in, some of the actions that are mentioned tie in with our priorities as well for this year and for the coming years. So we will be looking at the actions that Ellie has set out alongside the actions that are within the Food Security for All, It Matters plan, which Ellie has also considered, and some of the things have been incorporated, and work with David to do, I think, an initial triage of what we think kind of might have legs, if you like. And then, but to take it forward, we've really got to extend these partnerships. We need to really bring more people on board, and we need to find those synergies and work together and see who can take a lead on different aspects of it. So we need to engage with various sectors involved in the food and farming, as well as the community food initiatives. We're very aware of that. I'm just reiterating really what David was saying and Ellie as well. But the collaboration, the effective partnership working is something that we all really need to work on. It doesn't just happen because we want it to happen. I think it demands kind of credibility. It demands getting people together in person. And it may be, we can certainly help arrange some events, but it may be that we haven't decided yet because we haven't gone to that stage. But there's a case for having a wider summit, if you like, as they did in Frome. They did a piece of research called Who Feeds Frome, and then that was commissioned by the town council, and then it was a summit to get everyone who wanted to come together to kind of say, what is our collective action? So we could do that, but also perhaps more effectively, to really get to the nitty-gritty of it, we need to have sort of sector-specific gatherings, or looking perhaps at the conclusions, the way that Ellie has divided the conclusions in these three main areas: the need to increase fruit and veg consumption, the demand; secondly, increasing affordability and convenience; and thirdly, supporting the transition to sustainable farming. So some farmers are already on board, but it's hard for them to spend the time to come to meetings. So we need to go to where they meet and gather and go through their representative organisations, the Land Workers Alliance, the NFU, or the farm clusters, or the Melplash Agricultural Society, etc. So it's ahead of us to do that, but between us, I believe we can do it. We can help organise events. We can help deliver awareness raising campaigns. There's been an awful lot of work that's been going on for years to raise awareness, and this plan gives us a really fantastic focus to step up and to do more of that. We as Bridport Food Matters, we can contribute some more of the existing research that we've done over the recent years into the pros and cons of different kinds of food hubs, online ordering platforms, work with Tamar Grow Local. A Dorset diet was a plan that we had a couple of years ago that we haven't managed to develop, but this actually could give us the potential to bring that to the fore again and discuss it again. We need to jointly raise quite a lot of resource for this, work out first what we want to do and how we can do it together. And we're already beginning to talk about a bigger consortium and trying to raise larger amounts of money, Bridport Food Matters. And we would like to work with Stir to Action on this, and we'd like to work with the town council, among others, on this as well. So basically, I want to finally, I want to conclude by saying it's a fantastic report. It provides a really good framework and an opportunity for action. We need to work together to do this. So have a partnership a collaboration between the statutory, the community, and the business sector. And we as an umbrella, as Bridport Food Matters as an umbrella, as a community organisation, already have a growing number of partnerships within the community and the community groups. So that working together is a main topic. And secondly, and finally, now is the time for us all to step up. Obviously, it's more than a climate emergency, it's a health emergency, it's all sorts of other emergencies going on. And now is the time to step up. I think we'd all agree with that. The plan sets out the urgency, but it also provides us with the opportunity. So we're really, really delighted that it exists, and we're very excited to work with others to roll it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Candice. Thank you to all the three presenters. Could we just have a show of hands just to really appreciate the amount of work and knowledge that's been shared with us? It's just quite phenomenal. I kind of need to stretch as well and breathe and kind of go, oh, whew. So if I can just invite to open the sort of questions and answers, and as more cameras are coming on, could I just invite John, if you'd like to offer a few reflections in response or thoughts that you may have had during the presentations, and that could open us to everyone's questions.
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks to the presenters. What an absolutely awesome and enormously inspiring piece of work. But more than that, it's the call to action and the means to achieve. I think that's the thing that's so inspiring, what you've achieved here in this this document and in the work that supported it. The document seems to me to be a kind of a summary of such an enormous amount of goodwill and passion and enthusiasm, as well as a space in which people are starting and you know, clearly committing to change, and it reads incredibly well. I think from my point of view, the timeliness that Canada finished on there is the thing that strikes me at the moment. The need is so pressing for so many reasons, whether we're looking at it through the lens of climate emergency, whether we're looking at it in terms of our adaptation to an absolutely perfect storm of economic challenges and geopolitical challenges in terms of our food security nationally, but also through the goodwill and I think the increasing appetite that people have for trying to do things in this kind of way of looking at local needs, looking to build on things in a very asset-based, positive, strengths-based way of working together. And I think that kind of capturing of the scale and the depth of challenge that's required alongside the scale and the depth of commitment and the opportunity is really powerful. And I think that when we're looking at the systemic opportunities in Dorset, which we've talked about in these meetings before, I think again the time is there and the moment is right to have these conversations. In the chat, there's been some comments about talking about the county farms and other things that are already going on in the kind of wider area. And you know, I think this is very much a kind of beacon for Dorset, and to be shared and to kind of weave into wider conversations that are going on, and to learn, and for us to kind of in the whole county to kind of get behind and support the opportunities. And I think that a lot of creativity can spring, I think, from what's been written and how it's been written, that gives people that lovely kind of sweet spot of an achievable challenge or about achievable challenge where you can kind of see how you might be able to bring your own passion, your own opportunities, and some of this kind of lateral thinking, which I think is really important in this type of work, to think about how this project that looks like that can fit with this piece of work. And we might not have thought about that before. So you mentioned the health equity conversations, talked about kind of wellness and this being part of a wider kind of public health agenda, as well as it being about having a sort of resilience agenda here too. So I think it's an absolutely phenomenal piece of work. I'm so pleased to be able to kind of share in and learn so much from it. And I'm fascinated in terms of how we can support and develop this into the actions that you set out and those initial tasks and opportunities that you've described, Candida and Elise, eloquently, and how we can support what is an absolutely brilliant piece of local government work as well. I mean, what an amazing leadership that's been given, you know, unsurprisingly, wonderfully, by Bridport Town Council in getting so fully behind this. And I think anything that we can do to support that collectively and to share and spread that vision more widely, I think will be enormously helpful. I think my just maybe kick off a question, if I may. What I'm interested in is how we can tackle some of those chicken and egg situations. It's maybe a slightly appropriate measure where we've got an issue. Let's say if we're talking about supplying food to schools or supplying food to the local community hospital or wherever. How do we tackle some of those elements there where you've got a supplier that needs to be secure in its knowledge of the market it's going to sell to, and vice versa, where you need to generate a kind of shift in procurement in order to that comes with some reliability and some confidence in there. And I think that works at the kind of those big levels of big organizations, but also somewhat in terms of community trust as well. How do you see that kind of emerging going forward.
But I could just start on that, John, just because I happened to go to the Oxford Real Farming Conference this year, and there was a session on, what can local authorities do more of, and obviously a big chunk of that was around public procurement. And I think there was a guy there from, I think, East Ayrshire in Scotland, who had got a really good system in place for prioritising local providers and producers. And had been working on it for about 20 years, I think, in perfecting how local authorities can work to get healthy local food into schools, into hospitals, and into their procurement system. So if anybody's interested, I think seeing how other local authorities have approached this and learning from them, because I guess from my point of view, there's nothing really new. Somebody's done something and has developed something, and the first step is often to go and find out how they've got to where they are, and then reflect and start in your own place to start to put that into practice. So certainly East Ayrshire seem to be doing a great job on procurement. I don't know if Ellie's got any thoughts.
I think public procurement is one of those areas where we can really start off increasing fruit and veg consumption, because, as you say, it's quite difficult to know. Producers want to produce more, but they want to be able to make sure they'll be able to sell it, and consumers won't be able to consume more unless there is that available. But being able to provide contracts up front that ensure that the produce will be used up over the year can help fund farmers and help them make that leap. So public procurement was one I suggested because of being able to get those longer term contracts. But then community supported agriculture or other schemes like that, there are a lot of different models, and this one is a little prohibitory to some people, but payment upfront for a share in the community supported agricultural farm allows farmers to invest upfront in their seeds and in the infrastructure and so on, and then the investors should get a return over the course of the year. And I think that would be a really useful start to increasing fruit and veg consumption. And then later on, once more people are involved, you could look at more flexible models.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on the procurement side of things, except some time ago we had, when Local Food Links was set up under Tim Crabtree, I mean, we're talking a long time back, but Local Food Links still exist. At that time, it had local procurement, and that now provides, I don't know how many hundreds of meals every day to school kids all around. I mean, hundreds of meals, or maybe thousands. I don't know. It provides food for a lot of schools, and but it now gets its food from Nottingham. And my understanding is that there was a bid, there was a kind of a process of bidding, like who was going to win that contract, and the cheapest people were the ones who managed to get, who came down from Nottingham. So the food isn't, I mean, anyway, we won't go into too much detail, but you've got to have that political will, haven't you? And maybe Local Food Links here would be willing. They've come to some of our events, but the thing to go alongside that in terms of the demand within the schools is to give a mention to the Edible Gardens project that happens in 2 primary schools, and is working to some extent with the secondary school, or beginning to try to do that. And I think, well, Sarah Wilberforce is here, who's basically running that project, but it's taken sort of 12 years of work of producing vegetables in a primary school, and it's totally, from what I gather, affected the attainment and the popularity of that school. And many of the kids, I think things might have changed recently, but it affected at a time when you had a chef in a school using the produce from the gardens in the school meals, and that that had a massive effect. So the whole thing of maybe having those projects alongside however else the school meals run, is an effective way of doing things. I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything more about Edible Gardens.
Sarah, you're muted. Would you like to add anything there? You're muted.
You have to unmute with the dots at the top.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yes. Yes, that was interesting what Canada said. I think the question of the Nottingham link is actually out of date.
Oh, sorry.
It was the reason that Tim Crabtree started the food links, that he was horrified that if you free school dinners, you had a sandwich that travelled each day from Nottingham. But certainly at the beginning, Food Links had a community centre there, and that has gone years ago. And of course, Tim is no longer involved with it either. And they do feed something like 56 schools, and they have 3 centres. And I sat next to the lady at one of our events, and she said that actually they managed to get some meat and some eggs and potatoes locally, but nothing else. And I think this is that the fact she came there, 2 of them came, that there's possibilities of addressing that, because you know, that's a lot of schools. So yeah, I think that's something to be pursued, and if anybody knows will be interested in that, I think they should do that. But going back to the edible gardens, it's not without its challenges, but we do, particularly St Mary's, which has been going much longer. What's wonderful there is that they have access to this garden every day. We are only there one day, a part of a day, volunteers. We don't have enough of them, and they can come, and particularly if you're a special Ascend child, you come with your support, and it's a whole educational experience. And that's why we do the Charles Dowding No Dig, and we do quite a lot of science, and we hope that every class will have some experience there, but particularly year 5 that does organic gardening, and we do it at Bridport Primary School too.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to the other three responses there. So we've got one hand up from Rebecca, and please do put your hand up if you want to speak after that. Rebecca, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for such an inspiring session. I've got so many questions and comments. I'm not quite sure which of them to say first, but just on the public procurement piece, I've been looking quite a lot at a really interesting project in Cardiff called the Cardiff Courgette Pilot, which I can put a link to it in there. But the key thing that changed it there was that a local wholesaler for the initial pilot volunteered to pay the difference in price between conventional courgettes and organic courgettes to enable a local organic supplier, a new entrant, to be able to supply into a school summer holiday project to feed people. It was called Food and Fun. But this is now rolled out into a supply that was feeding people with vegetables from about 4 farms, agroecological vegetables from 4 farms across 3 counties in South Wales. So small things can lead to bigger things. But that really came out of sustainable food places, and also Peas Please, and the pledge of this wholesaler to do something to get people to eat more vegetables. And I just wondered whether there was any mileage in Bridport maybe joining sustainable food places and getting on that. Maybe you're already doing that, but I think it just adds a bit of extra leverage to persuade bigger business, because different businesses and councils like to have things that give them kudos. And I mean, it's a really brilliant organisation anyway, sustainable food places. And if we could work our way up through getting bronze and silver and gold eventually, and there's no reason why we can't, because we have got such an amazing history of food. So yes, I think that's worth considering.
Thank you, Rebecca. Please come along to our next meeting in February, which is February the 7th, where we're going to be discussing more about sustainable food places. I don't know if there's any
Oh, right.
comments from any of the presenters about.
Bridport was a sustainable part of the Sustainable Food Network when Linda Hull was working here in 2013 to 17. Yeah, we are yeah, that could be picked up again. I haven't quite understood whether you can be a sustainable food town any longer. I think they've changed it to a more county-wide thing.
Yes,
But
well, yes.
So our next, could I just intervene there just to say the next meeting is Wednesday, February the 7th, when we'll be discussing that more. If you don't mind, I'm going to pass on because there's a couple more hands up, just so we've got different, and there may be other questions for the speakers, but thank you very much, Rebecca. Peter and then Sue, Peter Wilson and then Sue Belgrave.
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm picking up on various things that my colleagues in Bridport have mentioned, particularly the food festival, which I'm very much involved with. And this year, one of the main themes is this food resilience, food sustainability, and taking on this work that Ellie and David Dixon and others have done. And Bridport Food Matters has a stall, has a marquee, in fact, during the festival, and to anybody can be part of that. But one thing that occurs to me, and I think Belinda from Lyme Regis made the point, and it came up at another meeting we had, where Bridport, for all its activity, is actually quite a small place. Working with other local areas such as Lyme, Dorset, wherever, Bedminster, would enhance the whole system, because we are, a lot of the farms that and growers in this area are not obviously in Bridport, but in the wider area. And what I would like to use this forum to invite other people to come and get involved with the food festival, because to my knowledge, apart from the county show and Melplash show, there isn't really anything similar to Bridport Food Festival in this wider Dorset area. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there is quite something that deals so significantly with local supporting local producers and local suppliers. So I'm putting out the invite. We are already meeting, as someone said, it's the 20th anniversary. I really want to engage with farmers and local producers to see how we can improve this direct access and all the different things that have been talked about. So if anyone wants, either through your good auspices, Sandra, or directly, to come along, we've actually got a meeting on Monday evening in Bridport if anyone wants to come along. But anyone would like to get involved from Lyme, Bedminster, Dorset, wherever, please come along, or get in touch with me, and we can see how this could be used as a shop window, as a way of promoting this whole idea.
Thank you, Peter. Could you put your email address in the chat, and then people can also pick up on that? And thank you for that invitation.
Indeed.
Could we have Sue next? And then there's also a question in the chat, which maybe Ellie could have a look at while we're there.
Hi, yes, and thank you for all of that inspiration. It was truly wonderful, really wonderful. I have a question and a comment. And apologies if I missed the answer to this question. Of the 26.9 thousand tonnes of food which you've calculated that is needed to feed the Bridport area, do you have any idea what proportion of that number is currently being grown locally? That's my question. And the comment is, well, it's a question really about whether there's been any conversation about where the biggest bang for the buck would be. So, for example, I really noticed that the absence of horticulture. So is it that there needs to be focused attention on horticulture, because that would enable us to get, a higher percentage of locally grown food, get that delivered as relatively quickly and efficiently as possible? So I'm interested in whether there's been any conversation of that sort of nature. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sue. There are two kind of questions there. Would somebody like to answer the?
I can just answer that, the last part of that, and then Ellie can do the calculation bit. But that idea of, where do you start? And I think that John said it at the beginning, this kind of chicken and egg, where it's a big complex system that needs to change, and where do you start on that process? I like you, I kind of think we need more horticulture businesses and activities in the Bridport area and across the country. And I think the point that Ellie's picked out is that two issues around land availability and skills training. And I think together with Candidate and Bridport Food Matters, we were going to go out with the plan now and talk in detail with various actors and players in the food system to see what they can do to help bring this plan about. And I'll be, certainly from the town council's point of view, really interested in connecting it to our bids to support skills training and development in the Bridport area, particularly around transitional skills. So, kind of new approaches, modern methods of construction, and new ways of doing things that are more circular in terms of their economy. And that may well be the place that we start, because there's some movement there and we can get some funding and we can start that part of the system to change. But certainly more horticulture businesses, more startups, more young people growing vegetables and having businesses in the area is a really important element for me.
And just to add, we've already begun conversations on a small scale with a number of farmers, half a dozen farmers on this project we've called Feeding Bridport Direct, with a view to increasing horticultural production as well as some mixed farming potentially. But the issue being about whether those existing landowners could set aside even small parcels of land for long-term leases.
Yeah.
Don't have accommodation and might help with infrastructure. And again, we could work hopefully with the Land Workers Alliance, and Rebecca in the room is a Bridport resident and works at a national level on horticulture. So that would be, hopefully we can join up on that too.
Thank you. And Ellie, did you want to answer the
Sure, quickly on the calculations. We don't really have stats for such a small area, so this is just scaling down stats for West Dorset and Dorset level, so take everything with a pinch of salt. But in general, I think we're producing quite a lot, definitely a lot more than the area needs, and we're a net exporter of agricultural produce to more densely populated areas. In particular, that's cereals and dairy, and I think poultry as well. I'd have to check, it was either poultry or eggs. And then massive deficiencies in definitely horticulture, which is why it's one of the key priorities everyone's mentioning, and a bit lacking in some other arable crops like potatoes and sugar beet and so. But the amount of production is definitely over the 26.9 thousand tonnes. I am factoring in with projections about how much could be produced locally, a yield reduction if farms were to convert to agroecological practices. So say right now, the amount of land that's in cereal production could produce a lot more than the area needs if it were using intensive cultivation methods. But if there were a shift to agroecological methods, it'd probably only just about be meeting that. We consider that transition essential despite the yield loss, because we are seeing so many issues to do with climate change and soil degradation and stuff, that we assume that intensive farming will no longer be viable in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Sue. And then I'm just going to, Pam, I'm just going to read out your message in the chat, if I may. Have you taken a look at that, Ellie? But for everybody else, bearing in mind the tension between local and sustainable when Dorset farming is mostly meat production, how will you tackle this mismatch between supply and demand for an increasingly vegan-based diet?
So I would say it's definitely true that meat production right now is unsustainable. The UK is a little less bad than some other places because we mainly rear our livestock quite extensively, so we don't get as many animal welfare issues, but there are definitely sustainability issues that mainly come with imported foods and use of food that could be feeding humans instead. If we transition to an agroecological system, then there are a lot less issues. If you look up Pasture for Life, they're a really good organization talking about how a lot of the sustainability and welfare issues can be reduced if you transition to grazing. So that would be pasture raised livestock. And so with our calculations, we assume that there's obviously a reduction in the amount of animals that are raised. I think I calculated around 33%. And in research I've done on a national level, it was a reduction of around 60% that was needed. But animals are still an integral part of the agroecological farming system. They are required to bring in some level of nutrients, especially nitrogen, and there's only so much that growing legumes can do. And so we're hoping that by transitioning away from intensive methods towards more extensive methods where animals are not fed human feed, where they're grazed and they're rotated through arable systems, so grazed in fields after cereals and so on, that wouldn't force people out of livestock farming. It would just shift them to a different sort. There would still need to be a dietary shift, but perhaps not as intense as going completely vegan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ellie, and thank you for your question, Pam Rosling. That was, yeah. So, as it's a moment with no hands up, I think I'm just going to say we've reached the end of the meeting. And once again, we're actually going to finish on time. And can I say a huge thanks to Ellie, to David, to Candida, to John, and to all of you for coming this evening. It's been really illuminating. And yeah, just to say, this is the final meeting of a series of 6 that have been hosted by Dorset Can and by At Help and Kindness with John. And the final meeting of that series will be, as I said, on February the 7th, where we will be kind of reviewing and also discussing what action now. Part of the beginning of the series was connected to the whole idea of, might Dorset want to become a sustainable food place, or might there be some other form of networking that's more suited to our county? And that will be in the mix of the conversation, yeah, for next time. So on that, I will just wish you a very good evening.
Where will the meeting be on the 7th?
It's going to be on Zoom again.
Oh, on Zoom. Okay.
Yeah, I did pop it in the chat.
Oh,
so it's,
sorry.
That's all right, not to worry. The link will be on the Dorset Can website, but I'll also send it out to you. Anybody who's on this call will receive it. So please do come. Your expertise would be well welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I will.
And many thanks to everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.